Sarah had always loved the quiet solitude of her remote cottage, nestled deep in the woods far from the noise of the town. The isolation had been a refuge, a place where she could write and think without interruption. Until that first night. It was past midnight when she noticed it. The faintest movement in the corner of her vision drew her attention away from her book. Outside the window, barely visible in the dim moonlight, stood a figure. It was unnaturally still, its silhouette framed against the trees like a statue carved from shadow. Sarah's breath hitched. The figure was tall, its proportions just slightly off, as if its limbs were too long or its posture too rigid. She blinked, hoping her eyes were playing tricks in the dark. But when she looked again, it was still there, watching. Her pulse roared in her ears as she lunged for the lamp beside her, flicking it on. The sudden burst of light flooded the room, and the figure was gone. No trace, no movement, not even a rustle of leaves to suggest it had ever been there. Sarah pressed a hand to her chest, willing her heartbeat to slow. She forced herself to approach the window, scanning the darkness beyond. The woods were silent, empty. But the feeling of being watched lingered long after she drew the curtains shut. Sleep didn't come that night. Every creak of the old cottage, every whisper of wind through the trees, made her flinch. She told herself it was nothing, just her imagination, just the isolation playing tricks on her. Yet deep down, she knew. Something had been out there, and it knew where she lived. The morning sun did little to ease Sarah's unease as she stepped outside, her slippers crunching on the frost-laden grass. The ground where the figure had stood the night before was untouched. No footprints, no disturbed earth, nothing to suggest anyone had been there at all. She circled the cottage, her breath forming pale clouds in the chilly air, but the only tracks were her own. The absence of evidence was somehow worse than if she'd found something concrete. It made the encounter feel like a hallucination, a trick of the night. Her gaze drifted toward Mr. Thompson's property, the only other dwelling within sight. The old man was hunched over his garden, pulling weeds with mechanical precision. Sarah approached, calling out a hesitant greeting. He straightened slowly, his dreamy eyes narrowing as they settled on her. "Did you see anyone outside my window last night?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Thompson wiped his hands on his overalls, his expression unreadable. "Didn't see a thing," he muttered, but the way his fingers twitched around the handle of his trowel betrayed him. There was something off about the way he avoided her eyes, the way his shoulders tensed under his threadbare flannel. "You sure you weren't just dreaming?" he added, a little too quickly. Sarah forced a smile, thanking him despite the cold not forming in her stomach. As she turned to leave, she caught him watching her from the corner of her eye, his lips moving silently as if reciting something under his breath. The air between them thickened with unspoken dread, and for the first time, Sarah wondered if her neighbor knew more than he was letting on. The empty ground where the figure had stood now felt like a taunt, a silent promise that whatever was happening was far from over. The silence of the night was shattered by 3 soft, deliberate knocks against the window pane. Sarah froze mid-step, her breath catching in her throat. The sound wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Something was out there. Her heart pounded as she turned her head slowly toward the window, dreading what she might see. There it stood. The figure from the night before, now closer, so close she could make out the hollow pits where its eyes should have been. Moonlight glinted off its gaunt, shadowed face and Sarah swore she saw its lips twitch into a grotesque smile. A chill crawled down her spine as it tilted its head, as if studying her. She wanted to scream, but her voice had abandoned her. The knocks came again, louder this time, more insistent. The figure didn't move, didn't raise a hand, so what was making the sound? Her hands trembled as she backed away, stumbling over her own feet. A whisper slithered through the room, a voice too faint to decipher but laced with malice. The knocks grew frantic, rattling the glass like a storm wind, and Sarah finally screamed. She turned and bolted for the bathroom, slamming the door behind her and locking it with shaking fingers. Sinking to the floor, she pressed her hands over her ears, but the knocks followed her, now coming from the bathroom walls. The lights flickered, and in the mirror above the sink, she saw it. The figure, standing just behind her, its rotting fingers reaching for her shoulders. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying for dawn. Sarah sat at her rickety wooden desk, the dim glow of her laptop casting eerie shadows across the cottage walls. The events of the past few nights had left her desperate for answers. She typed frantically, searching for any history tied to her remote home. Hours passed, the silence outside nearly suffocating, until she stumbled upon an old newspaper archive. Her breath hitched as she read the headline "Local Man Vanishes Without a Trace, 1923. The article detailed how a farmer named Elias Granger had disappeared from this very property, his body never found. The land was sold shortly after, and the cottage was built over the rumored site of his unmarked grave. The next morning, Sarah drove into town, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She wandered into the dusty general store, where an elderly man with milky eyes sat by the stove. When she mentioned the cottage, his expression darkened. Leaning in, his voice dropped to a whisper. "That place is cursed," he said. "Elias wasn't just killed, he was betrayed. His own brother buried him there to steal his land. They say his spirit won't rest until justice is served." The old man's gaze flickered to the window, as if expecting to see something. Or someone, outside. "And now," he added, "it seems he's found someone new to torment." Sarah's blood ran cold. The pieces fell into place, the figure's hollow eyes, its unnatural stillness. It wasn't just a random haunting. Elias was here for her. As she left the store, the wind howled through the trees, carrying a faint, mocking laughter. Emily's fingers trembled as she pieced it together. The doll wasn't just haunted. It was a vessel, and Lillian wanted something. Justice, revenge, acknowledgement. Emily didn't know. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside, slithering through the halls like a venomous whisper. The air grew thick, carrying the scent of damp earth and something rotting. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying it was her imagination, but when she opened them again, the figure stood at the foot of her bed. Its hollow eyes bored into hers, its mouth stretched into a grin too wide for any human face. She lunged for the lamp, fumbling with the switch, but the light only made it worse. The figure didn't vanish this time. It stepped closer, its shadow stretching unnaturally across the walls. Sarah stumbled backward, her pulse hammering in her throat, and retreated to the bathroom. Locking the door behind her, she pressed her back against it, gasping for air. But then she saw it, the mirror. Her reflection stared back, but it wasn't her. Its grin mirrored the figure's, its eyes black and empty. She screamed, smashing the glass with her fist, but the laughter only grew louder, bouncing off the shattered shards. The house creaked, shadows pooling in the corners, shifting like living things. Every surface reflected the figure now, its gaunt face in the window, its skeletal fingers dragging across the kitchen counter. Sarah's breath came in ragged bursts, her vision blurring at the edges. Was she losing her mind? The figure's voice slithered into her ear, a rasping whispers, "You can't hide from me." She covered her ears, but it was inside her head, scratching at her thoughts. The walls seemed to close in, the air thinning, as the line between nightmare and reality dissolved. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the woods, branches clawing at her arms and face. The figure, its hollow eyes, its unnerving grin, had been inside her house. It had whispered her name. She couldn't stay there another second. The only place left was Mr. Thompson's, the reclusive old man who lived half a mile down the dirt road. She pounded on his door, her knuckles raw, her voice hoarse from screaming. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. Mr. Thompson stood there, his face gaunt in the dim light, his eyes wide with something between fear and recognition. In his trembling hands, he clutched a faded photograph. Sarah's blood ran cold. The figure in the photo, the same one that had haunted her, was dressed in antiquated clothing, its expression eerily blank. That's it," she stammered. "The thing outside my window." Mr. Thompson's voice was a hollow whisper. "My great-uncle, he died violently. They buried him where your cottage stands now." His grip tightened on the photo. "He's been waiting for someone like you." Sarah's knees buckled. What does he want? The old man's gaze darkened. Justice? Or a replacement? He grabbed her wrist, his fingers ice cold. "You shouldn't have come here. He won't let you leave now." A gust of wind howled through the trees, and the door slammed shut behind her. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. Sarah turned slowly, dread coiling in her stomach. The figure stood at the end of the hallway, its head tilted, its smile widening. The first faint light of dawn crept through the shattered window, casting jagged shadows across the bathroom floor. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed her back against the cold tiles, her eyes fixed on the mirror above the sink. The figure was there again, its hollow eyes, its too wide grin. But this time, something was different. The way it moved, the way it mirrored her every shuddering breath. And her blood turned to ice as the realization struck her. The figure wasn't just watching her. It was her. The reflection in the glass tilted its head, its grin splitting wider than any human mouth could. Sarah's own face stared back, but warped, twisted by something ancient and hungry. The spirit's curse hadn't been haunting her. It had been changing her. Every night, it chipped away at her sanity, replacing pieces of her with something else. A dry, rattling laugh echoed from the mirror, and Sarah's own voice whispered back. "You should have run sooner." The glass rippled like water. A hand, her hand, but blackened and clawed, reached out, grasping her wrist with impossible strength. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the figure's guttural growl as it pulled her forward. The last thing she saw before the mirror swallowed her whole was Mr. Thompson's face in the doorway, his eyes wide with grim satisfaction. The cottage fell silent. In the bathroom, the mirror reflected only an empty room. But if anyone had been listening, they might have heard a faint knock from the other side.